My name is Jessica, and I was 32 years old when my entire world shattered. 7 months pregnant with our first child, I discovered my husband Ryan was having an affair with Amanda, my best friend since college. As if that betrayal wasn't devastating enough, my beloved father was dying of pancreatic cancer during this same nightmare. I thought I'd completely collapse under the weight of it all. Instead, I found a strength I never knew existed within me. Before I dive into my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe if you want more stories about finding strength when life falls apart. Trust me, what happened next changed everything. Looking back, I can pinpoint exactly when my perfectly constructed life began, though at the time it felt like any other ordinary day. I was working as a marketing director for a mid-sized agency in Chicago. My career was thriving, I had just been promoted, and my client portfolio was growing impressively. Work consumed most of my time, which is why when my college roommate dragged me to her cousin's wedding 5 years ago, I went reluctantly. That wedding changed everything. Ryan Matthews stood across the room, tall with dark hair and the kind of smile that immediately put you at ease. He was the best man, delivering a toast that had everyone laughing and crying simultaneously. I remember thinking how comfortable he seemed in front of a crowd, confident but not arrogant. When our eyes met during the reception, something clicked. That night we talked until the venue staff began stacking chairs around us. "You know, most people would have checked their watches by now," Ryan said as we finally walked to the parking lot at 2 in the morning. "I guess I'm not most people," I replied, surprising myself with my boldness. Our romance moved quickly after that. Ryan worked in financial consulting, helping businesses restructure their finances. He was smart, driven, and seemed to understand my dedication to my career. Within 6 months, we were inseparable. At the 1-year mark, he proposed during a weekend trip to Lake Michigan. The ring was perfect, a vintage oval diamond that had belonged to his grandmother. I said yes without hesitation. Throughout this whirlwind romance, Amanda Stevens remained my biggest supporter. We had been inseparable since our freshman year of college when we were randomly assigned as roommates. She was the extrovert to my introvert, pulling me out of my comfort zone and into adventures I would have otherwise missed. When I called to tell her about Ryan's proposal, she screamed so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "I knew it. I knew he was the one from the moment you described him," she gushed. "Please tell me I get to be your maid of honor." Of course she would be. Amanda stood beside me on my wedding day in a pale blue dress, handling every crisis from my mother's last-minute dress emergency to the florist delivering the wrong centerpieces. She gave a touching speech about friendship and finding love, and I remember thinking how lucky I was to have both Ryan and Amanda in my life. After the wedding, we settled into a beautiful 4-bedroom house in the suburbs. Ryan wanted space for a future family, a home office, and a guest room for when our parents visited. The first 2 years of marriage were blissful. We traveled, advanced in our careers, and began seriously discussing starting a family. Each month when my period arrived, I felt a twinge of disappointment, but Ryan always reassured me. "It'll happen when it's meant to happen," he would say, kissing my forehead. "We have plenty of time." My father, William, adored Ryan from their first meeting. Dad was a retired literature professor, intellectual and thoughtful, with a dry wit that matched Ryan's perfectly. They bonded over baseball and history books, often disappearing into deep conversations during family gatherings while my mother and I rolled our eyes affectionately. "You found a good one, Jessie," Dad told me repeatedly. He reminds me of myself when I was younger. Coming from my father, this was the highest compliment imaginable. After trying for almost 2 years, the pregnancy test finally showed 2 pink lines. I stared at it in disbelief before calling Ryan at work, my voice breaking with emotion as I shared the news. He came home early with flowers and sparkling cider, his eyes wet with tears as he placed a hand on my still flat stomach. "We're going to be parents," he whispered, his voice filled with wonder. The timing seemed perfect. We were financially stable, settled in our careers, and emotionally ready for this next chapter. I scheduled my first prenatal appointment and began daydreaming about nursery colors and baby names. Then, just 2 weeks later, my father called. His voice sounded strange, hesitant in a way that immediately sent alarms through me. "Dad? What's wrong? I need you to come over, sweetheart. Your mother and I have something to discuss with you." The drive to their house, normally 20 minutes, felt eternal. When I arrived, they sat me down in the living room where I had grown up watching Saturday morning cartoons and opening Christmas presents. The familiar setting made the news even more surreal. "It's pancreatic cancer," Dad said, his voice steady though his hands trembled. "Stage 4. It's already spread to the liver." My mother sat beside him, gripping his hand so tightly her knuckles were white. I learned they had known for a week, running tests and meeting specialists before telling me. The prognosis was grim. 6 months to a year with treatment. Maybe less without it. "But you just retired," I said stupidly, as if that mattered, as if cancer checked your schedule before invading your body. "Well, apparently I've got one more challenge ahead," Dad said with a weak smile. "But now I'll get to meet my grandchild. That's something to fight for." I drove home in a daze, tears blurring my vision, so badly I had to pull over twice. When I told Ryan, he held me as I sobbed against his chest, promising we would get through this together. That Dad would get the best treatment available. That we would support my mother through this nightmare. "Your only job is to stay healthy for the baby," Ryan insisted. "I'll handle everything else." In those early days, Ryan seemed to live up to his promise. He researched oncologists and treatment options. He joined my father at his first oncology appointment, taking detailed notes while I sat paralyzed by grief. He arranged for meal deliveries to my parents' house and hired a cleaning service for them. Amanda stepped up too. She brought over prenatal vitamins and pregnancy books, staying late to discuss baby names when all I could think about was my father's illness. She listened to my fears about becoming a mother just as I was losing my father. She created a group chat with our friends to coordinate support for both my pregnancy and my family. Looking back, I should have noticed the subtle warning signs. Ryan began working later, claiming big projects needed his attention. His phone gained a new password that he explained away as a company security requirement. Sometimes I would enter a room and feel the conversation between Ryan and Amanda shift, their laughter cutting off abruptly. "Just discussing your baby shower," Amanda would say with a bright smile. "It's going to be a surprise." I dismissed the uneasy feelings, attributing them to pregnancy hormones and the stress of my father's illness. I had bigger concerns. Morning sickness that lasted all day. My father's first chemotherapy session that left him weaker than I had ever seen him. The ticking clock of both my pregnancy and my father's prognosis counting down simultaneously. Each Sunday, Ryan and I would have dinner with Amanda. These had been our tradition since before Ryan and I married, but now they took on greater significance. Amanda would bring pregnancy-friendly meals and updates about friends I was too exhausted to stay in touch with. Ryan would mix mocktails for me while making real ones for himself and Amanda. I would watch them laughing together, developing inside jokes I wasn't part of, and tell myself I was fortunate to have them both in my life. How blind I had been. The first unmistakable hint that something was wrong came during my 3rd month of pregnancy. The initial excitement had somewhat faded into the reality of constant nausea, inexplicable food aversions, and fatigue that made even showering feel like climbing Mount Everest. My father had started his first round of aggressive chemotherapy, and I split my time between work, prenatal appointments, and sitting beside his hospital bed while he received treatment. Ryan had grown increasingly distant, his enthusiastic participation in pregnancy apps and baby name discussions waning to occasional distracted nods when I mentioned anything baby-related. One evening, after returning from the hospital where my father had suffered a particularly rough reaction to his treatment, I found Ryan and Amanda in our kitchen, wine glasses in hand, laughing intimately. "We didn't hear you come in," Amanda said, straightening up and smoothing her hair. "I just stopped by to drop off some ginger tea for your morning sickness. And I'm helping Ryan deal with all this," she added with a sympathetic smile. "It must be hard for him too, with you so focused on your dad and the baby." I remember standing in the doorway, still wearing my coat, feeling like an intruder in my own home. Something about their body language, the way they leaned slightly away from each other when I entered, sent a chill through me. But then Ryan was hugging me, asking about Dad, and the moment passed. The following week, Ryan missed my 16-week prenatal appointment, the one where we might hear the baby's heartbeat for the first time. He texted 30 minutes before with a work emergency that couldn't wait. I sat alone in the waiting room, watching couples hold hands and flip through parenting magazines together, fighting back tears of disappointment and hormonal rage. Amanda offered to come in his place, but was busy with work herself. "Next time," she promised. "I want to see my niece or nephew on that screen." That same night, while sorting laundry, I found a woman's perfume on one of Ryan's dress shirts. Not a fragrance I recognized, something floral and expensive. When confronted, Ryan became immediately defensive. "It's probably from hugging Stephanie at work," he explained, referring to his colleague who had recently received a promotion. "We had a celebration lunch for her." "You're being paranoid, Jess." Maybe I was. The pregnancy books warned about increased sensitivity and emotions during this time. Plus, with my father's health deteriorating rapidly, my anxiety levels were already skyrocketing. My obstetrician had warned me about managing stress for the baby's sake, so I pushed down my suspicions and apologized for overreacting. Yet small inconsistencies continued piling up. Amanda suddenly developed an intense interest in Ryan's work projects, asking detailed questions about his clients and colleagues at our Sunday dinners. She offered to help Ryan shop for nursery furniture to take that burden off Jessica while she deals with her dad. They began texting each other directly instead of through our group chat. During one particularly bad week, when my father was hospitalized for an infection his compromised immune system couldn't fight, I had my first anxiety attack. Sitting in the hospital cafeteria, I suddenly couldn't breathe, my heart racing so fast I was certain I was having a heart attack. The emergency room doctor explained it was likely stress and anxiety, warning me again about the impact on my pregnancy. "Your blood pressure is elevated," he said sternly. "You need to find ways to reduce your stress level." When I shared this with Ryan, expecting concern, his response caught me off guard. "Maybe you're creating problems that aren't there," he suggested. Amanda says pregnancy can make women paranoid and overly emotional. "It's probably just hormones making everything seem worse than it is." "You discussed my mental state with Amanda?" I asked, hurt that my private struggles had become conversation fodder. "She's your best friend," Ryan replied defensively. "She's worried about you too." Amanda became increasingly involved in our baby preparations, showing up with paint samples for the nursery and insisting on helping Ryan assemble the crib I had carefully selected. "You shouldn't be around paint fumes or lifting heavy things," she reminded me. "Let me and Ryan handle it." I wanted to feel grateful for her help, especially as my father's condition worsened and required more of my emotional energy. Instead, I felt increasingly sidelined in my own pregnancy, watching Amanda and Ryan make decisions about my child's room without consulting me. My mother, always perceptive, pulled me aside during one of Dad's treatment sessions. "Something seems off with Ryan," she observed quietly. "He barely asks about your father anymore, and he's missed the last 3 family dinners." "He's busy with work," I defended automatically. "And someone has to earn money while I'm distracted with everything else." Mom gave me a long look, but didn't push further. Later that week, Dad confided his own concerns while I sat beside his hospital bed. "I've always liked Ryan," he said, his voice weaker than the week before, his face gaunt from weight loss. "But a man who doesn't stand beside his pregnant wife while her father is dying, that's not the man I thought he was." "He's doing his best," I insisted, though the words sounded hollow even to my ears. With my father's health rapidly declining, I spent increasing amounts of time at the hospital or my parents' house, helping my mother manage medications and doctor appointments. I would often return home late to find the house empty or Ryan already asleep, claiming exhaustion from work. Several times, I called him while driving home only to have the call go straight to voicemail, then arrived to find him showered and in bed, claiming he'd been home for hours. The credit card statement that arrived that month contained another red flag. Charges from an upscale restaurant downtown on nights Ryan had claimed to be working late. When questioned, he explained they were client dinners, necessary for securing new business. The statement also showed a charge at a jewelry store I didn't recognize. An anniversary gift for my parents, he explained quickly. Don't ruin the surprise by asking more questions. I wanted desperately to believe him. The alternative was too painful to contemplate, especially with everything else falling apart around me. So I nodded and apologized for snooping, turning my attention back to the latest update on my father's treatment plan. It was easier to focus on the crisis I couldn't deny than confront the one I wasn't ready to acknowledge. By my 5th month of pregnancy, my body had transformed dramatically. My previously flat stomach now protruded prominently, making my condition obvious to anyone who saw me. While some women glow during pregnancy, stress had taken its toll on me. Dark circles shadowed my eyes from nights spent worrying about my father and increasingly my marriage. My blood pressure remained concerningly elevated despite medication, leading my doctor to diagnose pregnancy-induced hypertension. She warned me of the risks of preeclampsia if I couldn't find ways to reduce my stress levels. Your baby is showing signs of being smaller than expected, she explained during an ultrasound. This could be related to your stress levels and blood pressure issues. You need to prioritize rest and relaxation for both your sakes. How could I explain that rest felt impossible? My father had been moved to hospice care, his oncologist gently explaining that the cancer had proven too aggressive for treatment. His prognosis had shortened from months to weeks. Each day, he seemed to fade a little more, his once robust frame now skeletal, his vibrant mind increasingly clouded by pain medication. Ryan's absence became more pronounced during this critical time. He consistently found excuses to avoid hospital visits, claiming important client meetings and project deadlines. When he did accompany me, he spent most of the time in the hallway on his phone, returning with coffee breath that couldn't quite mask the scent of alcohol. Your father doesn't want to see me like this anyway, he justified when I confronted him about his detachment. I'm giving you space for family time. Even more suspicious was how Amanda's availability suddenly mirrored Ryan's. On days when Ryan was working late, Amanda would text that she couldn't meet me for our planned coffee or hospital visit due to last-minute conflicts. The coincidences became too frequent to ignore. One evening, while Ryan showered, a text notification lit up his phone on the nightstand. I had never been the type to snoop, but something compelled me to glance at the preview. From Amanda, last night was amazing. Can't wait to. The message cut off there, and before I could process what I'd read, Ryan emerged from the bathroom, snatching his phone when he saw me looking at it. Privacy, Jessica. Boundaries, he snapped, his reaction far more defensive than the situation warranted. Who was that from? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady despite my racing heart. Work group chat. Nothing important. He pocketed the phone and changed the subject. The next day, one of our neighbors mentioned seeing Amanda's car in our driveway several times while I was at the hospital with my father. It's so nice your friend checks on your house while you're out, she said innocently. Ryan must appreciate the company with you gone so much. Each new piece of evidence added to my growing suspicion, yet I still couldn't bring myself to confront the full truth. Ryan had begun criticizing my appearance, commenting on my pregnancy weight gain and how I let myself go since my father's diagnosis. He complained about my obsession with my dying father, as if spending time with him during his final days was an overreaction. Without telling Ryan, I installed a small security camera in our living room, linking it to my phone under the pretense of home security with my frequent absences. I told myself it was for peace of mind, but deep down I knew I was looking for evidence of what I already suspected. Amanda's behavior toward me shifted subtly too. While still outwardly supportive, she became less available for me personally while constantly texting with Ryan. During my baby shower, which she organized with minimal effort and maximum credit, she seemed distracted and irritated when guests focused attention on me and the baby. Ryan left the shower early, claiming a headache, and Amanda disappeared shortly after to check on him, returning an hour later with flushed cheeks and freshly applied lipstick. The breaking point came when I found a hotel receipt in Ryan's suit pocket while doing laundry. The date corresponded with a night he'd claimed to be at a work conference in the city, too far to drive home. The hotel was less than 3 miles from our house. That same week, during a rare lucid moment between pain medications, my father shared wisdom that would soon guide my decisions. "Jesse," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "your mother and I raised you to stand tall, even when it hurts. Never accept disrespect from anyone, especially those who claim to love you. Life's too short for false relationships." He squeezed my hand with surprising strength. "Whatever's happening at home, face it with the same courage you're showing here with me. I've always been proud of you, but never more than now, watching you carry both your child and this burden." That night, I lay awake beside Ryan's sleeping form, watching his chest rise and fall, wondering how someone so familiar could become a stranger. My suspicions had transformed from nagging doubts to physical symptoms. Insomnia, loss of appetite, tension headaches that no amount of pregnancy-safe medication could touch. At my last prenatal appointment, my doctor had again expressed concern about the baby's growth rate and my own physical condition. "Something has to change," she warned. "For both your sakes." She was right. I could no longer ignore what was happening for the sake of peace or convenience. My child deserved better. I deserved better. With my father's words echoing in my mind, I decided to actively investigate rather than continue avoiding the painful truth. The truth revealed itself on a Tuesday afternoon. I sat beside my father in the hospice facility, reading aloud from his favorite Hemingway novel while he drifted in and out of consciousness. The medication kept him comfortable, but increasingly disconnected from reality. These moments of connection had become precious, increasingly rare islands in a sea of medicated sleep. My phone buzzed with a notification from the home security camera. Motion detected in living room. I nearly ignored it, assuming it was the cleaning service I had hired to maintain the house during this chaotic time. Something made me check the alert anyway. The live feed showed Amanda entering our home using her own key. I watched, my body growing cold, as she moved comfortably through the space, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror, adjusting her hair. She looked different somehow, more polished than when she visited me, wearing a dress I had never seen and higher heels than she typically wore for casual visits. Within minutes, another notification. Ryan entered, earlier than his usual return time from work. I watched in stunned silence as they greeted each other with the easy intimacy of longtime lovers. He pulled her close, kissing her deeply in a way he hadn't kissed me since early in my pregnancy. His hands moved possessively over her body as they made their way upstairs toward our bedroom, beyond the camera's view. The phone slipped from my fingers, clattering to the floor. My father stirred at the noise, his eyes opening to find me frozen, one hand pressed against my mouth to stifle the scream building in my chest. "Jessica?" His voice was thin but lucid. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I couldn't speak, could barely breathe through the vice grip of betrayal squeezing my chest. I showed him the phone screen, still displaying the empty living room where moments before my husband and best friend had stood. Dad struggled to focus on the small screen, then looked up at me with a clarity that had been absent for weeks. "Go," he said simply. "Deal with this now. I'll be here when you get back." "I can't leave you," I protested weakly. "Some battles can't wait," he replied, his voice suddenly stronger. This is one of them. Go fight for yourself and my grandchild. The 30-minute drive home passed in a blur. I drove mechanically, one hand resting on my swollen belly where the baby kicked vigorously, as if sensing my distress. Rage replaced shock, building with each mile, focusing my thoughts with startling clarity. By the time I parked in our driveway, beside Amanda's red sedan and Ryan's company car, I felt oddly calm, possessed by a cold fury that steadied my shaking hands. I entered quietly through the side door that led to the kitchen, hearing muffled sounds from upstairs. My body moved on autopilot, climbing the stairs I had ascended thousands of times before. The door to our bedroom stood partially open, soft music playing inside, the sounds of their encounter unmistakable. I pushed the door open fully, the dramatic action unnecessary as they were too engrossed in each other to notice immediately. They were in our bed, the bed where we had conceived our child, Amanda's head thrown back in pleasure, Ryan's back to the door. So this is why you both have been too busy to visit my dying father, I said, my voice unnaturally steady. They separated in panic, Amanda scrambling for the sheet, Ryan turning with an expression of shock that would have been comical under different circumstances. For a moment, nobody spoke. The only sound was our collective breathing and the soft music still playing from Ryan's phone. Jessica, Ryan recovered first, his face transforming from shock to a calculated calm that revealed how quickly his mind worked to construct a defense. This isn't what it looks like. Really? I rested one hand on my pregnant belly, because it looks exactly like my husband and my best friend having sex in my bed while I sit with my dying father. Amanda began crying, loud theatrical sobs that once might have triggered my sympathy. It just happened, Jess. We never meant to hurt you. Things like this don't just happen, Amanda. You made choices. Both of you. Repeatedly. Ryan stood, pulling on his boxers, approaching me with his hands raised as if calming a wild animal. You haven't been here, Jessica. You're always at the hospital. What did you expect? The audacity of his statement stunned me momentarily. I expected loyalty while I supported my dying father. I expected the basic decency humans show each other, let alone spouses. You abandoned this marriage months ago, Ryan continued, his tone shifting to accusation. You checked out when your father got sick. Amanda was here for me when you weren't. I'm pregnant with your child and supporting my dying father, I said, each word precise and measured. And your response was to sleep with my best friend rather than support me through the two most significant events of my life. Amanda had gathered her clothes, clutching them against her naked body. Jessica, please. We can work through this. I'll end it with Ryan. It was just physical, a mistake. Get out, I interrupted, looking directly at her. Get out of my house and my life. Both of you need to leave immediately. Ryan's expression hardened. This is my house too. You can't just kick me out. Watch me. The calm that had carried me through the confrontation began fracturing as a sharp pain radiated across my abdomen. I gasped, doubling over slightly. Jessica? Amanda took a step toward me, concern suddenly replacing her crocodile tears. Don't touch me. Another pain seized me, stronger this time. The baby. In my fury and shock, I had forgotten the precious life depending on my stability. My blood pressure must have skyrocketed. I need to call my doctor. I backed out of the room, fumbling for my phone, dialing my obstetrician's emergency line with trembling fingers. The nurse who answered instructed me to lie down, breathe deeply, and monitor the frequency of any contractions. Premature labor was a serious risk in my condition. Ryan and Amanda had used my momentary distraction to dress. They stood awkwardly in the hallway as I followed the nurse's instructions, sitting on the edge of the guest room bed, timing the space between pains. You need to go to the hospital, Ryan said, his tone shifting to false concern. Let me drive you. I'm not going anywhere with you, I replied, the contractions already spacing out as I focused on my breathing. In fact, I want both of you to leave now. Jessica, be reasonable, Ryan argued. This is still my house. Where am I supposed to go? That stopped being my concern when you decided to sleep with my best friend. I looked up from my phone timer. You have 30 minutes to pack essential items and leave, or I'm calling the police and reporting you for trespassing. You wouldn't, Amanda whispered, horrified. Try me. I met her gaze steadily. 30 minutes. Starting now. Ryan's face contorted with anger. You'll regret this. Half of everything is mine, including this house. You can't afford the mortgage on your salary alone, especially not with a baby and medical bills. 29 minutes, I replied, unmoved by his threats. As they retreated to gather belongings, my phone rang. My father's hospice facility. I answered, fearing the worst, but it was Dad himself calling from the nurse's phone. Jesse, did you get home? His voice sounded alarmingly weak. Yes, Dad. I tried to keep my voice steady. Everything's under control. That's my girl, he whispered. Stand your ground. That brief connection with my father restored my determination. By the time Ryan and Amanda had gathered their immediate necessities, my contractions had subsided to occasional twinges. I sat in the living room, pointedly checking the time as they carried bags downstairs. Jessica, we need to talk about this rationally, Ryan attempted one final time. Think about the baby. About finances. About your father. You can't handle all this alone. I'd rather be alone than with either of you. Keys on the counter before you leave. Amanda tried approaching me, tears streaming down her face. Jessica, please. 20 years of friendship. Don't throw that away over one mistake. One mistake. I laughed bitterly. How long has this been going on? Weeks? Months? Their exchanged glance told me everything. That's what I thought. Keys. Now, after they finally left, I called a locksmith for an emergency same-day service, despite the exorbitant fee. Within hours, new locks secured every entrance to the house. I sat alone in the sudden silence, hands protectively cradling my belly, the emptiness around me reflecting the hollowed-out feeling in my chest. That night, contractions returned briefly before subsiding again. The doctor assured me over the phone that this was likely false labor triggered by extreme stress, but warned me to come to the hospital immediately if they returned with regularity. I lay awake in the guest room, unable to face our marital bed, listening to Ryan's increasingly angry voicemails demand access to his house and his things. In the darkness, I made a promise to my unborn child and myself. This would not break us. Somehow, we would emerge stronger. The morning after discovering Ryan and Amanda's betrayal, I woke with a clarity and purpose that cut through my exhaustion. While my personal life had imploded, certain practicalities couldn't wait. Before Ryan could act, I needed to protect myself and my child legally and financially. My first call was to a divorce attorney recommended by a colleague who had recently navigated her own messy separation. The receptionist, hearing the urgency in my voice, squeezed me in for a consultation that afternoon. My second call was to my boss, explaining in brief, professional terms that I was dealing with both a family health crisis and a marriage dissolution. Her immediate offer of flexible hours and remote work options lifted one weight from my shoulders. Take care of yourself and that baby, she insisted. Your projects will wait. I spent the morning documenting everything I could remember about Ryan's recent behavior, financial transactions, and absences during critical moments of my pregnancy and father's illness. I photographed the hotel receipt and took screenshots of the security camera footage, emailing everything to myself as backup. By afternoon, I sat across from Patricia Walsh, a divorce attorney with 20 years of experience and a reputation for protecting vulnerable clients. Her office walls displayed degrees from prestigious universities alongside children's artwork, an unexpected juxtaposition that somehow reassured me. Given your pregnancy and your father's terminal illness, we'll request an emergency hearing for temporary orders, she explained after listening to my situation. You need immediate protection for housing and finances before your husband can drain accounts or attempt to force you from your home. Her efficiency was exactly what I needed. By the end of our 90-minute consultation, she had drafted preliminary paperwork and outlined a strategy that prioritized my stability during pregnancy. The retainer fee was substantial, depleting my personal savings, but the investment in our future security was non-negotiable. While in her office, I blocked both Ryan and Amanda on my phone and all social media platforms. The constant notifications had become a source of stress, with Ryan alternating between angry demands and tearful apologies, while Amanda sent paragraph-long justifications that painted herself as an unwitting victim of circumstances and emotions. As predicted, Ryan's family began calling that evening. His mother, who had always treated me with cool politeness, now expressed shock at my hasty and dramatic response to what she characterized as one indiscretion. "Marriage requires forgiveness, Jessica," she lectured. "Think about your baby needing their father." "My baby needs a mother who models self-respect," I replied before ending the call. My own mother arrived the following day with a suitcase and unwavering support. At 63, she somehow found strength to care for both my dying father and her pregnant, betrayed daughter. She moved into the guest room, cooking nourishing meals and screening calls while I attended legal meetings and medical appointments. "Your father is so proud of you," she told me over dinner. "He keeps telling the hospice nurses about his daughter who stood up for herself even while carrying his grandchild." Hearing this brought the first genuine smile to my face since the discovery. Dad's pride meant everything, especially now. The emergency hearing occurred with surprising speed, the judge sympathetic to my circumstances. Ryan appeared with his own attorney, his suit pressed and his expression appropriately contrite for the court. The temporary orders granted me exclusive use of our marital home during pregnancy and required Ryan to continue contributing to the mortgage and utilities. His request for unrestricted access to retrieve belongings was limited to a supervised visit with a court-appointed observer. While the legal machinery began turning, Amanda made her play for sympathy and forgiveness. Her email arrived with the subject line, "Please read this," followed by 1,000 words of self-serving explanation about how she had never intended to fall for Ryan, how their connection had developed innocently through their mutual concern for me, how devastated she was to lose my friendship. "We never wanted to hurt you," she wrote. "It just happened when we were both feeling abandoned by you." I forwarded the email to my attorney without replying. Patricia added it to our documentation of the affair, noting how it established a timeline that contradicted Ryan's claims of a one-time mistake. Ryan's supervised visit to collect more belongings became another opportunity for manipulation. He arrived with boxes and a moving truck, accompanied by the court observer, a retired sheriff's deputy with a clipboard and impassive expression. I watched through the doorbell camera as Ryan played the role of devastated husband, sighing heavily as he packed clothing and personal items. When he attempted to remove jointly owned electronics and artwork, the observer intervened, referring to the detailed list approved by the court. "Jessica," Ryan called out, knowing I was monitoring from inside. "This is ridiculous. We need to talk face to face without lawyers and judges between us." I didn't respond, a silence that clearly frustrated him more than any words could have. My doctor placed me on partial bed rest after detecting protein in my urine, a warning sign of developing preeclampsia. My blood pressure remained dangerously elevated despite medication, putting both me and the baby at risk. The stress of simultaneous crises was taking a physical toll that couldn't be ignored. "Your only job right now is growing this baby," Dr. Chin instructed firmly. "Everything else is secondary." The order to prioritize rest came just as our social circle began fracturing along loyalty lines. Mutual friends called or texted, often beginning with "I'm not taking sides, but," before proceeding to do exactly that. Some believed Ryan's version that I had emotionally abandoned the marriage during my father's illness. Others expressed shock and support for me, dropping off meals or offering to run errands. My financial situation became precarious when Ryan emptied our joint checking account the day after the emergency hearing, taking the maximum allowed under the temporary orders. The legal maneuver was technically permissible, but left me scrambling to cover immediate expenses. My attorney filed an emergency petition, resulting in court-mandated temporary support given my high-risk pregnancy and reduced work capacity. Through it all, my colleagues proved unexpectedly supportive. They organized a meal train, rearranged project timelines to accommodate my limitations, and even pooled resources for a gift card to cover baby essentials. Their kindness stood in stark contrast to the betrayal that had shaken my foundation. One afternoon, while attending a prenatal appointment, I spotted Amanda in the hospital lobby. She had positioned herself near the elevator banks, clearly intending to intercept me. My mother, accompanying me that day, stepped protectively forward. "You need to leave," Mom said, her voice quiet but fierce. "You have no right to be here." "I just want 5 minutes," Amanda pleaded, drawing attention from nearby patients and staff. "Jessica, please. 20 years of friendship has to be worth 5 minutes. When I remained silent, she grew louder, more desperate. "You can't just throw away 2 decades over one mistake. You're being unreasonable." Hospital security responded to the disturbance, escorting a now sobbing Amanda from the building while my mother guided me to a private waiting area. My doctor, witnessing the tail end of the scene, immediately checked my blood pressure and found it dangerously elevated. "This type of stress could trigger premature labor," she warned. "I want you to consider a temporary restraining order if this harassment continues." My attorney added the incident to our growing documentation, filing harassment charges that would later strengthen our case for full custody. The legal process, initially overwhelming, now provided a framework for establishing boundaries that neither Ryan nor Amanda seemed capable of respecting voluntarily. Friends who had remained loyal organized a second baby shower to replace the tainted event Amanda had hosted. The intimate gathering in my mother's backyard, with carefully selected guests and thoughtful gifts, helped restore some joy to my pregnancy. For a few hours, surrounded by genuine support, I could focus on the upcoming birth rather than the disintegration of my marriage. Throughout these tumultuous weeks, my father's condition continued deteriorating. The hospice staff prepared us for the inevitable, explaining the signs of approaching death with gentle frankness. I divided my limited energy between legal meetings, doctor appointments, and precious hours at his bedside, often reading aloud or simply holding his increasingly frail hand. "You remind me so much of your mother," he told me during one lucid moment. That same steel underneath the softness. "You'll be a wonderful mother." I held onto his words like talismans during the darkest moments, drawing strength from his unwavering belief in me. While my marriage crumbled and my body struggled to sustain my child, my father's love remained the one constant I could trust absolutely. My father's final days arrived as autumn painted the trees outside his hospice window in brilliant golds and reds. His once robust frame had withered to barely 100 pounds, his skin translucent over visible bones, yet his mind experienced surprising clarity in what the hospice nurse called terminal lucidity. During these precious windows of awareness, Dad and I had conversations that would sustain me through the difficult months ahead. He asked about the divorce proceedings, nodding with satisfaction when I described standing firm against Ryan's manipulative tactics. "I want to see those papers," he requested one afternoon, his voice barely audible. "The divorce filing." I hesitated, concerned about burdening him with legal documents during his final days. "Please, Jessica. I need to know you're protected before I go." The next day, I brought copies of the divorce petition and temporary orders. He studied them with the same careful attention he once gave to his students' dissertations, asking pointed questions about financial provisions and custody arrangements. When satisfied, he squeezed my hand. "Good girl. You're not letting fear drive your decisions." That same afternoon, Ryan attempted to visit my father, claiming a right to say goodbye to his father-in-law. The hospice staff, under strict instructions about approved visitors, denied him entry. His angry response required security intervention, adding another incident to our legal documentation. 2 days later, Dad called me to his bedside with unusual urgency. A hospice volunteer had helped him write a letter to his unborn grandchild, which he now pressed into my hands. For when they're old enough to understand, he whispered. About integrity. About choices. The envelope, addressed simply to my grandchild, contained his final gift, a legacy of wisdom I wouldn't read until much later. That night, he declined further pain medication, wanting clarity for our final conversations. I sat beside him until dawn, listening to stories from his childhood, wisdom accumulated across 70 years, and his unwavering belief in my strength. You will rebuild, he promised. And you'll be happier for having removed the rot from your foundation. My father died peacefully the following evening, my mother and I each holding one of his hands as his breathing gradually slowed, and then stopped altogether. The room felt suddenly larger without his presence, emptied of the force of personality that had animated it even during his illness. Arranging his funeral while 8 months pregnant became yet another challenge in a season overflowing with them. My mother handled most details, but certain decisions required my input. We selected readings that reflected his love of literature, music that had filled our home during my childhood, and a simple oak casket that matched his unpretentious nature. The morning of the funeral, I woke to fresh spotting and mild contractions. My doctor, concerned but not alarmed, advised monitoring the symptoms while avoiding unnecessary exertion. Dressed in black that strained against my pregnancy, I sat in the front pew of the church where I had been baptized, feeling my baby move restlessly as the organ played my father's favorite hymns. Ryan appeared just as the service began, sliding into a rear pew despite not being invited. His presence added unnecessary tension to an already overwhelming day. During the reception afterward, he approached me with a sympathetic expression so perfectly crafted it might have seemed genuine to anyone who hadn't witnessed his recent behavior. Jessica, I'm so sorry about William. He was like a father to me too. Please leave, I replied quietly, one hand resting on my belly. This day isn't about you. I have every right to be here. He was my father-in-law. You surrendered that relationship when you betrayed his daughter and unborn grandchild, my mother interjected, appearing protectively at my side. The family has requested privacy. Please respect that. His face hardened. This isn't over, Jessica. You can't keep cutting me out. That's my child too. As he turned to leave, several friends formed a protective circle around me, shielding me from further confrontation. The stress of the encounter triggered stronger contractions, requiring me to sit quietly while breathing through the discomfort. Later that day, flowers arrived at the reception hall from Amanda. The card expressed condolences and hopes for reconciliation. Without comment, my mother removed the arrangement and donated it to a nursing home across town, where other patients might enjoy them without the tainted sentiment they carried for us. My attorney continued pressing for expedited divorce proceedings given my advanced pregnancy and the documented affair. The judge, sympathetic to my circumstances, scheduled hearings at an accelerated pace rarely seen in family court. Ryan's attorney fought against this timeline, arguing for standard proceedings that would extend well beyond my due date. My client has a right to be present for the birth of his child, his lawyer argued in court. My client has a right to labor without the stress of her husband's presence after his documented infidelity with her best friend, Patricia countered, especially given the high-risk nature of her pregnancy. The judge ultimately granted my request for a temporary restraining order preventing Ryan from being present during delivery without my explicit permission, a ruling that sent him storming from the courtroom. The week following my father's funeral brought a new level of exhaustion I hadn't known possible. Grief and pregnancy combined in a physically overwhelming cocktail that left me barely functioning. My mother practically moved in permanently, handling everything from thank you notes for funeral flowers to prenatal vitamin reminders. 2 weeks before my due date, in the middle of signing paperwork for my father's estate, my water broke. The sudden gush of fluid and accompanying contraction took us both by surprise. "Mom," I gasped, gripping the edge of the dining table. "It's time." Instead of calling Ryan, we followed the birth plan developed with my doctor and attorney. My mother drove me to the hospital while I notified my medical team. The maternity ward had been briefed about my situation and the restraining order preventing Ryan from being present without invitation. "We'll need to see the court order," the intake nurse explained gently. "And we'll flag your room in the system." Labor progressed slowly, painfully, the baby's position making each contraction more intense than the birthing classes had prepared me for. After 12 hours of increasing discomfort, my doctor discovered the baby had turned posterior, facing my abdomen rather than my spine. "This is making labor more difficult," she explained. "And your blood pressure is climbing despite medication." By the 20th hour, exhaustion clouded my thinking. The baby's heart rate began showing concerning patterns during contractions, dropping lower each time before recovering. My mother held my hand, her face tight with worry as medical staff increased their activity around us. "Jessica," my doctor finally said, "I'm recommending an emergency C-section. The baby is showing signs of distress, and your blood pressure is reaching dangerous levels." Within minutes, I was being prepped for surgery, a blue drape erected across my midsection as anesthesia numbed my lower body. My mother, gowned and masked, sat beside my head, whispering encouragement as the surgical team worked with quiet efficiency. "You're doing beautifully," she repeated. "Your father would be so proud." At 2:17 a.m., after 26 hours of labor, my daughter entered the world with a lusty cry that filled the operating room. The sound pierced through medication fog and exhaustion, connecting directly to something primal within me. "She's perfect," the doctor announced, briefly holding her up for me to see before whisking her to the assessment area. 8 pounds, 2 ounces. Through tears, I watched as they cleaned and measured my daughter, wrapping her in a hospital blanket before placing her against my cheek, the closest we could manage during the surgery completion. Her tiny face, red and angry at the indignity of birth, was the most beautiful sight I had ever witnessed. Recovery from the C-section brought new challenges. Moving from bed to bathroom required excruciating effort. Breastfeeding positions that didn't pressure my incision took creative problem-solving. Through it all, my daughter's perfect tiny features reminded me why every struggle had been worthwhile. Ryan, notified of the birth by hospital protocol despite the restraining order, arrived the following day demanding to see his child. Security intercepted him in the lobby, explaining that the court order remained in effect until I indicated otherwise. "This is illegal," his voice carried down the hallway. "I have rights." "So does she," the security officer replied calmly. "And right now, her right to recover peacefully takes precedence." My mother slipped out to handle the situation, returning 20 minutes later with tight lips but reassuring words. "He's gone." The hospital threatened to call police if he didn't leave voluntarily. On our 3rd day in the hospital, I made a decision that felt both terrifying and absolutely right. I named my daughter Willow after my father William. No middle name connecting her to Ryan's family as we had once planned. Just Willow Parker, taking my maiden name rather than Ryan's surname. "He'll fight that in court," my mother warned gently. "Let him," I replied, watching my daughter sleep. This is who she is. Coming home to the empty house felt surreal. My mother stayed for the first 2 weeks, sleeping on the sofa to help with night feedings and incision care. The nursery, once a source of pain given Amanda's involvement in its creation, had been completely redecorated by friends during my hospital stay. The pale yellow walls Ryan and Amanda had chosen were now a soothing sage green, the furniture rearranged to remove all traces of their input. As predicted, Ryan filed for equal custody immediately, his petition emphasizing his rights as Willow's biological father while conveniently omitting his absence during pregnancy and my medical complications. My attorney countered with extensive documentation of his abandonment during crisis, the affair with my best friend, and his volatile behavior since discovery. The judge will take all factors into consideration, Patricia assured me, including his choices during your pregnancy and your father's illness. Those first weeks with Willow blurred together in a haze of exhaustion, pain medication, and overwhelming love. I learned to function on minimal sleep, to change diapers despite abdominal incision pain, to distinguish between her different cries. My mother returned to her own home after 2 weeks, but visited daily, bringing prepared meals and handling laundry while I focused on healing and bonding with Willow. Amanda attempted contact repeatedly, sending emails about being part of Willow's life and her auntie-role that she believed transcended her betrayal. After the third such message, my attorney sent a formal cease and desist letter, threatening harassment charges if contact continued. Through bleary-eyed midnight feedings and endless diaper changes, I sometimes caught myself looking for my father in Willow's features. Her determined expression when frustrated reminded me of his concentration face. The way she studied new objects with complete focus echoed his scholarly approach to the world. One afternoon, while organizing his personal effects, my mother discovered a journal I hadn't known existed. Inside, Dad had written letters to his future grandchild, starting from the day I announced my pregnancy and continuing until his handwriting became too shaky to continue. He knew he wouldn't meet her, Mom explained, handing me the leather-bound book. So he found another way to be present in her life. That night, after Willow fell asleep, I read his words by nightlight, tears streaming unchecked as his voice seemed to fill the quiet room. He wrote about courage, about integrity, about finding joy in difficult circumstances. The final entry, dated just days before his death, contained a simple promise. I may not hold you in my arms, little one, but I will always be part of your story. 6 months after Willow's birth, I stood in our backyard watching early morning sunlight filter through autumn leaves. My daughter lay on a blanket beside me, her legs kicking with newfound coordination, delighted by the dappled shadows playing across her face. At that moment, something settled within me, a quiet certainty that we would be okay. The divorce had been finalized the previous week, ending a legal battle that had drained my energy and savings, but ultimately provided the clean break I needed. The judge, influenced by the extensive documentation of Ryan's behavior during my pregnancy and father's illness, granted me primary custody, with Ryan receiving only supervised visitation until Willow turned 1. After that, he would have 1 weekend per month, gradually increasing as she grew older, contingent upon his consistent involvement and appropriate behavior. The financial settlement reflected Ryan's misconduct as well. The court ordered him to refinance the mortgage into my name alone, with equitable division of our other assets. His attempts to claim financial hardship fell apart when my attorney produced evidence of luxury purchases for Amanda during my father's hospice care. Therapy had become my lifeline through this process. Initially reluctant to add another appointment to my overwhelming schedule, I found the weekly sessions essential for processing the multiple traumas of betrayal, loss, and new motherhood. My therapist, a compassionate woman who specialized in both grief and divorce recovery, helped me separate legitimate anger from destructive bitterness. The goal isn't to never feel pain, she explained during a particularly difficult session. It's to prevent that pain from determining your future choices. Returning to work had brought another layer of healing. My company offered a flexible arrangement, allowing me to work remotely 3 days weekly, coming into the office only for essential meetings. My colleagues welcomed me back without the awkward pity I had feared, treating my situation with respect rather than gossip. Projects that had been redistributed during my leave were gradually returned to my portfolio, restoring my professional identity alongside my new maternal one. Through a parent support group recommended by my therapist, I developed friendships with other single parents navigating similar challenges. Our weekly coffee meetups provided practical advice about childcare logistics and emotional support from people who truly understood the unique exhaustion of solo parenting. Several of these new friends had their own stories of betrayal and rebuilding, their thriving lives offering tangible proof that healing was possible. Ryan's involvement with Willow proved as inconsistent as his behavior during my pregnancy. He attended the first few supervised visits punctually, bringing expensive toys inappropriate for her age and taking countless photos for social media. By the third month, he began canceling appointments with flimsy excuses about work commitments. The supervisor documented each absence in reports that would later influence custody decisions. Amanda made one final attempt at reconciliation, approaching me outside my office building one afternoon. Her appearance had changed dramatically, hair cut short and dyed darker, as if attempting to physically separate herself from the woman who had betrayed me. "Jessica, please," she began, stepping into my path. "I miss you." What Ryan and I did was unforgivable, but 20 years of friendship has to count for something. Looking at her, I felt an unexpected calm rather than the rage or pain I had anticipated. "It did count for something, Amanda. That's why your betrayal hurt so deeply. But my life has no space for people I can't trust around my daughter." "We ended things months ago," she offered, as if this revelation might change my position. "It wasn't real. Not like our friendship was. It was real enough when my father was dying and I was carrying my child alone," I replied. "Please respect my boundaries. I wish you well, but from a distance." Her tears as I walked away felt oddly disconnected from me, someone else's emotional weather that no longer had the power to affect my climate. That evening, I documented the encounter for my attorney, who added it to our ongoing file but agreed that Amanda no longer posed a significant threat to our stability. The marital home, once my dream setting for family life, now held too many painful memories. After consulting with my financial advisor, I decided to sell the property and purchase a smaller townhouse closer to both my office and my mother's home. The new space, though more modest, felt immediately more peaceful, free from the emotional landmines hidden throughout our former residence. As Willow grew more aware and interactive, I created traditions honoring my father's memory. Each Sunday morning, we visited the botanical garden he had loved, my voice pointing out plants and flowers while carrying his memory forward. I started a memory box containing photographs, his favorite books, and small mementos that would someday help Willow understand the grandfather who had loved her before she existed. I began journaling to Willow, inspired by my father's example. Late at night, after she fell asleep, I wrote about my hopes for her future, lessons from my experiences, and promises about the mother I aspired to be. Many entries focused on self-respect and recognizing genuine love, values I hoped to instill without burdening her with my past pain. "Your worth is inherent," I wrote one evening, "never measured by someone else's capacity to recognize it." Physical healing progressed alongside emotional recovery. My C-section scar faded from angry red to silvery pink. Postpartum hair loss slowed, new growth creating a halo of baby fine strands around my face. Sleep deprivation, while still a constant companion, became more manageable as Willow began sleeping longer stretches. Small victories accumulated into significant progress. Ryan's relationship with Amanda imploded shortly after our divorce finalized. The mutual friends who had initially sided with them reported increasing arguments about commitment and trust, ironically the very foundations they had destroyed in their relationship with me. When Ryan began dating someone new, Amanda's social media filled with thinly veiled references to betrayal and karma, a irony not lost on anyone familiar with our history. As Willow's first birthday approached, I planned a small celebration in my mother's backyard. The guest list included only people who had supported us consistently through our challenging year. Watching my daughter smash her first cake, surrounded by genuine love and laughter, I realized how far we had traveled from those darkest days. That evening, after the guests departed and Willow finally surrendered to sleep, I found myself writing a letter to my younger self, the woman who had discovered her husband's betrayal while holding her dying father's hand. "You are stronger than you can possibly imagine," I wrote. "The pain that feels unbearable now will eventually become bearable, then manageable, then simply part of your story rather than its defining chapter. Trust your instincts. They're whispering the truth even when fear tries to drown them out." My father's illness and death, though excruciating, had ultimately given me an unexpected gift. Watching him face mortality with dignity and principle had provided a masterclass in prioritizing what truly matters. Had Ryan's affair happened at another time, I might have compromised my self-respect for the sake of appearances or convenience. Instead, Dad's example had illuminated the importance of integrity precisely when I needed that guidance most. Forgiveness remained complicated territory. My therapist reminded me that forgiveness didn't require reconciliation or continued relationship. It wasn't about excusing behavior, but refusing to let resentment consume my limited emotional resources. Some days I managed this perspective better than others, but increasingly I recognized that moving forward served Willow and me better than remaining anchored to past betrayals. "The people who stay when your world falls apart are your real family," my father had told me during one of our final conversations. Looking around at the life Willow and I were building, supported by my mother, loyal friends, compassionate colleagues, and new connections, I understood the profound truth of his words. Our circle might be smaller now, but its foundations were unshakable. On difficult days, when single parenting and grief collided in overwhelming waves, I reminded myself that healing isn't linear. Setbacks didn't erase progress. Each time I picked myself up and continued forward, I demonstrated for Willow the resilience I hoped she would develop through watching me rather than through similar painful experiences of her own. The future remained uncertain in many ways. Would Ryan eventually become a consistent presence in Willow's life or fade into periodic appearances? Would I someday trust enough to consider another relationship? How would I explain our complicated family structure when Willow began asking questions? These uncertainties once terrified me but gradually transformed into open questions rather than looming threats. What I knew with absolute certainty was this: in rebuilding rather than merely surviving, I had discovered capabilities previously hidden even from myself. The woman who had once defined herself primarily through relationships with others now stood firmly on her own foundation, stronger for having been tested by fire. As another day ended, I kissed Willow's forehead and whispered the same promise I made each night: "We are going to be more than okay." We already are. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after a devastating betrayal? What gave you the strength to move forward? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that they too can survive what feels unsurvivable. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes our greatest strength emerges precisely when we think we have none left.